Welcome to a special edition of Scott Fox After 9. On Fridays, I typically do listener DMs, and that's one of my favorite parts of this pod, the interaction with you, the listener. It means so much to me when people hear something that I'm talking about on the podcast, and it strikes a nerve to the point where they want to go and slide into my DMs and weigh in on that. I don't want you to think that I forgot about listener DMs. I didn't, but I'm going to preempt it because something unique and something special is happening today. You'll probably recall not that long ago, Prime Minister Mark Carney went over to Davos, Switzerland, and he gave a speech to the World Economic Forum. And he was talking about the New World Order. What is the New World Order? Well, that would be an order that's basically led by China, and middle powers, countries like Canada, would all work together and increase trade amongst each other. The whole point of that is to make us less reliant on the Americans or more reliant on the Chinese, depending on how you see that new world order unfolding. Well, of course, that's just one option for the future of Canada. The other option is to try and restore relations with America. Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and the man who wants to be prime minister, he gave a speech on his vision for how Canada and the U.S. can repair our relationship and work together going forward. And it doesn't mean being reliant on the Americans. It means a cooperative relationship. Just like I did when Prime Minister Carney spoke in Davos, I'm going to dedicate this entire episode of the pod to giving you Pierre Poilievre's whole speech. The speech is about half an hour long. I'll tell you, I am going to interrupt from time to time and offer a little commentary on what Pierre has said. But I think it's really important that all Canadians understand the choice in front of us. Option one, the New World Order that China will lead and Canada will be a middle power in. Or a more integrated North America where Canada and the U.S. are working much closer together, but Canada fully retains its sovereignty. Those are the two choices that Canadians have in front of them right now. So here it is, Pierre Poilievre's whole speech from yesterday in Toronto on Canada-U.S. relations.
Thank you very much to Michael and Shelby, two critical members of our Conservative team, to deliver a stronger Canada at home so we have unbreakable leverage abroad. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius delivered a timeless truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will have strength. That idea is true not only for people, but also for countries. Canada cannot control decisions made by foreign leaders or words by foreign presidents. We cannot control what global shocks and volatility might happen. But we do control what we do in our own country. We control whether our economy is solid or fragile, whether it is dependent or self-reliant, whether we drift or whether we build. And the lesson in this moment is simple. The path to sovereignty is focusing relentlessly on what is within our power. Canada itself was born from this insight. Ours is a country not built by accident. Confederation was a conscious act of national self-determination, a decision by scattered provinces to unite, to build, to govern themselves rather than to be swallowed up by American annexation. And it wasn't all talk. Yes, the founders met. Yes, they debated. Yes, they agreed. But above all else, they got things done.
Okay, at this point, Pierre Poilievre is going to go into French, and I'm going to offer an English-only version of his speech today. And those are the only edits I'm going to make to this speech from Pierre Poilievre. So far, so good. He's outlined a little bit of the history of Canada. He's speaking to a room full of business people in Toronto, and part of the reason for this speech is exactly like I said at the beginning of this pod, to lay out an alternative vision than the one Mark Carney has laid out. Let's get back to it and hear more about what Pierre is promising for Canadians.
The interesting thing when you read the British North American Act is this. There are no grand ideals. There are not big abstractions like you find in so many constitutional texts around the world. It's actually an instruction manual. It sets out responsibilities. It's a who does what document. It basically says you do this and you do that, and together we'll get it done. And that's how they got it done. They cleared the way for a railway. They opened the prairie fields to feed the nation. They built canals and opened a nation to free commerce, something that was laid out in our original constitutional text, even if it's not respected to this day. Now, that history of practical getting things done is more relevant now than ever. Conservatives are the party of Sir John A. Macdonald, the party of Confederation, the party of Canada. Macdonald and the founders did not build this country by reacting emotionally to every external disturbance. They did not define Canada by grievance or anxiety. They defined it by strengthening what lay within their control. Building, doing, and completing. We drove steel railway across the Rockies in 4.5 years. Later, we carved the St. Lawrence Seaway, and we did that in 5 years. We built the CN Tower, then the tallest freestanding structure in the world, in 3 years in the 1970s. That is how we built an unbreakable country. That spirit is again necessary as we move towards the CUSMA review starting this summer. Now let's be clear with who we're dealing with. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, if my conservative friends will forgive me for quoting him, said living next to the United States is like sleeping next to an elephant. No matter how friendly and even-tempered the beast, one is affected by every twitch and grunt. Now, the last few years, there's been a lot of movement from the beast next door. A lot of movement, maybe a little bit more than usual, and there will be more to come. So what do? Well, as conservatives, we like to look back in order to see forward. How do we get here? For more than 3/4 of a century after the Second World War, we lived probably in the most secure geopolitical environment the world has ever seen, right next door to the United States, which became the biggest economy and military in the history of our planet. The United States was not just a neighbor, it was the gravitational center of the global economic system. For Canada, this reality produced a deep sense of security. For the most part, that arrangement served Canada and the US extraordinarily well. The result was massive buildups of north-south infrastructure, roads, bridges, railways, pipelines, transmission lines. Our two countries built the St. Lawrence Seaway, which became an H2O highway from Duluth and Thunder Bay all the way to Europe. We built a free trade system and seamlessly integrated our economy. We enjoyed the longest undefended border the world has ever seen. We sided with each other in major conflicts, although our relationship was punctuated by the occasional squabble. Supply chains totally integrated. Investment accelerated, living standards rose, but a long period of risk-free living presents a new risk of its own: complacency. And let's be honest, we and they became complacent. We underinvested in our military. Bureaucracies grew and blocked in our resources. Politicians indulged in performative ideological grandstanding because they thought that they could afford to. We made ourselves unnecessarily dependent. At the same time, the global landscape was changing, and an overly complacent America was missing what was happening. China's economic expansion was one of the most extraordinary phenomena in the history of the world. This country went from having 80% of its citizens living on less than $1 a day to the second biggest economy in the world in 1 generation. While American capitalism had earlier buried clunky Soviet communism, a new authoritarian powerhouse quietly and rapidly snuck up on the US. All the economic enrichment came without the expected political liberalization. And one day, America awoke and realized that its entire industrial base had been hollowed out. Whole towns vanished to job outsourcing, and their economy was reliant on a country that was at best a serious rival and at worst a hostile threat. There was a backlash. Americans went from driving globalization to believing that they were its victim. Zero-sum mercantilism came roaring back to life. President Trump has sought to overturn the trading system that previous American presidents had championed and even created. Now, some of this correction, in fairness, was overdue, but it missed the target by going after countries like Canada, which were not the problem. What President Trump says about Canada is wrong. Our trade surplus does not represent exploitation by Canada of the United States of America. Quite the opposite, in fact. It is the result of us selling very good and very well-priced, in fact, below-market-priced raw materials, which America then upgrades and turns into massive profits for its economy. Ironically, U.S. workers gain six-figure salaries, turning our raw meat material into profit to their country, and they owe a big debt of gratitude to politicians and bureaucrats in Canada who have blocked us from building the necessary infrastructure to take those resources to world markets. He's also wrong to ignore the sacrifices Canada has made for the United States. Canadians fought and died along Americans in Afghanistan. And let's be clear, we did that exclusively in response to an attack on our American neighbors. We also fought and bled along America, not just in the trenches of Western Europe, but in Alaska's Aleutian Islands, defending American territory in the Second World War. And of course, we joined rapidly to fight communism in Korea, and in countless other ways, our cooperation, whether it's NORAD or our efforts to secure the Arctic, have been beneficial to both countries. And let's be clear about another thing. The President's talk of 51st statehood, whether it is a joke or not, is unacceptable. It goes without saying there is zero chance of Canada ever being a part of the United States.
Okay, I think this is a good point to take a break. I'm wondering how this is going over because I can tell you that this speech gets really good. When he starts talking about how Canada and the U.S. can work together, but Canada can remain a sovereign country, I found it very, very engaging, and that's part of the reason I'm dedicating an entire episode to Pierre's speech. I think every Canadian should be informed on what our options are, and I'm making it as easy as possible for everyone to hear what Pierre had to say. But that was a history lesson, and it went on for a while. I kind of like knowing that Pierre Poilievre has read the British North America Act. I kind of like that he is well-versed on our history, and I do like the fact that he pointed out the Conservative Party of Canada is the party of Sir John A. Macdonald. It is Canada's party, the founding party. The history lesson is almost over, and soon we're going to get to the good stuff. I think knowledge is power, and I think you should know what the Conservatives are proposing. And as you're listening to this, think about the practicality of it. Our closest friend and neighbor. We have a bit of a dispute going on with them. I think that's a very understated way of putting it. However, that doesn't mean that the relationship is broken forever. It just means that it needs to be adjusted. It means we've got to sit down and talk. Much like in a relationship, the best thing you can do to solve your problems is have communication. And right now, there's not a lot of communication. The Prime Minister is overseas right now trying to work out new trade deals, and good for him. We do need new trade deals. But I think we also need to fix the relationship with the Americans, and that's what Pierre is about to discuss.
We love our country. We love our country just as Americans, understandably and justifiably, love their country too. And that's why so many Canadians are upset by the President's comments and trade actions, especially considering that Canada and the United States will always be neighbors. Geography is the most permanent factor in international relations. No country can call up a realtor and relocate. And the truth is, we wouldn't want to. Canada and the United States have built probably the greatest partnership any two countries have ever built in the history of the world. That partnership remains profoundly in the interests of both our peoples and both our countries. And it's important to distinguish between governments and people. Politicians come and go. People remain. The miner in Appalachia, the energy worker in Texas, the engineer in California, they do not wake up every day asking how they can stick it to the Canadians. That's just the reality. The American people are not our adversaries. In fact, survey results demonstrate that Americans overwhelmingly have a favorable view of Canada and consider our two nations to be friends. That goodwill, by the way, may be our most important strategic strength going into these talks. As President Kennedy said when he was addressing the Canadian Parliament, geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. Necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature hath so joined together, let no man put asunder. That insight captures a reality deeper than any temporary dispute. Canada's prosperity and security are inseparable from a stable relationship with the United States. And that is why we should not declare a permanent rupture with our biggest customer and closest neighbor in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with Beijing, a regime the Prime Minister himself said was the biggest threat to Canada just a year ago. Now, we seek no fight with China or its people, who make up a brilliant and extraordinary civilization. But its government and its proxies have kidnapped our citizens, stolen our technology, interfered in our elections, and pushed fentanyl into our streets. Canada should talk and trade where prudent, but never make the mistake of confusing engagement with dependency. China is not a substitute for the United States of America.
This speech playing very well to the room in Toronto. So far, Pierre Poilievre, just an observation on my part, is coming off very diplomatic. You know, it's real easy to lob pot shots, and I think that the partisan nature of our politics right now, where people have to decide, are you in favor of a new world order, one that's led by China and Canada is a middle power dealing with other middle powers, or a further integration between Canada and the U.S., but a sovereign Canada that is free to make its own choices and free to also pursue trade with other countries as well? I think that Pierre Poilievre so far has done a very good job at, one, not offending the Chinese. That's important here. We need to work with China. And also not offending the Americans. The elephant in the room here is Donald J. Trump. He's easily offended. He's a little thin-skinned, some people might say. And there's been a lot of comments that have come from Canadian elected individuals that were intended to try and play off of his thin-skinnedness. Is that the right way to say it? There's a lot of Canadian politicians that have tried to, quote unquote, poke the bear and agitate the president, thinking that that's a strategy to make him engage further. My estimation is that Pierre Poilievre's approach here is probably the one that's going to work. Don't offend the Americans. You can still maintain Canada is a sovereign country. You can even declare what the president said was not acceptable. But we don't want to offend anybody, and we don't want to say something we can't take back. And I think that that's the point that Pierre Poilievre is trying to make here as he walks a fine line, but in my estimation, he's doing a good job at it so far.
Canada should pursue diversified trade and global engagement. Conservatives stand in favor of a free trade agreement with India and deeper ties with other countries. But diversification must be grounded in realism. Not all partners are interchangeable. The Prime Minister proclaimed in the Davos speech that he wanted a new middle power alliance. Actually, there's nothing new about it at all. We already have that. We've had it for years. In fact, Canada already has free trade with over 50 other countries, and most of them are middle powers. We should look to deepen those relationships, but their markets are already open to us. But the problem, here's the problem, and here's the irony. The problem is not that these countries block our products from coming in. It's that our own government blocks our products from getting out. And that is the major trade barrier. Signing meaningless communiques or more stagecraft masquerading as statecraft won't fix that reality. In fact, some of the worst tariffs imposed on Canada today are those imposed by the government here. Slow permits, changing rules, high taxes, outright bans on shipping oil off our northwest BC coast. We have the second slowest building permits anywhere in the OECD. It now takes 19 years to get a mine approved. None of that has changed in the last year. Unfortunately, the federal government caused many of these obstacles. Fortunately, it can reverse them. By unblocking resources and unleashing our economy, we can become affordable and autonomous and build the leverage we need, the unbreakable leverage we need to fight for tariff-free access to the United States. But we must divide the problem into what we control and what we do not control. We must not, and most important of all, we cannot allow others to control us. We cannot allow President Trump to distract us from the work we need to do here at home. As Prime Minister Harper recently said, the question for Canada is not how we feel about what the U.S. is doing, but how we adapt. The most effective response to uncertainty is not outrage, it is results. The encouraging reality is that the two biggest pressures facing Canada today, affordability and autonomy, have the same solutions: abundant, low-cost energy, unlocking resource development and home building, a strong military, and digital sovereignty. These four pillars form our plan to make Canada stronger at home so that we can have unbreakable leverage abroad.
Again, the room very receptive to what Pierre is saying so far. You know, I think one of the differences here is Prime Minister Carney has a vision, right? He wants the new world order. He thinks, and he says every opportunity he gets, there has been a rupture in the relationship between Canada and the U.S. He wants to unite the middle powers, so to speak, the ones that we're not already united with, I guess, because we do. And Pierre is right. We do have free trade agreements with lots of different countries, including some of the ones that he's visiting. So Prime Minister Carney wants to put all of his eggs in that basket. One of the other things, though, in fairness, that Prime Minister Carney promised was he would unlock our resources here at home. And one of the things that many people have noticed is that nothing's really happening. We still haven't approved any pipelines. We still haven't found any major new customers for our oil exports, our LNG, and more. We need to unlock our resources here at home because that is the key to prosperity. Now, how do the Americans factor into that? Well, they don't necessarily. We don't have to be completely reliant on selling all of our product to the Americans. There's other customers out there. But what we do have to do is be a good friend and neighbor, and we do have to work together. And Pierre's about to explain more about that.
For energy to be affordable, we should eliminate all carbon taxes, not just the visible ones, but all of them. Permit rapid oil and gas and electricity development. Boost our dollar by selling our resources to the world and increasing the purchasing power of our people. We should cancel EV rebates that subsidize foreign automobile production. Instead, take sales tax off of vehicles made here in Canada. We must unlock the most tariff-proof industry we have in Canada, home building. Nobody can tariff a home built in Canada. It's our materials, our land, and our workers. We need to remove all red tape and taxes so homes can be built, our forestry sector can come roaring back, and our 100,000 unemployed construction workers can get back into the job market. No foreign government can stop us from doing that. We need to expand the supply so that there's more affordability here at home. Canada does not lack workers or capital. What we lack are permits. We need the government to rapidly grant them. The federal government should grant 6-month maximum delays to deliver permits, repeal anti-development laws, and adopt a one project, one rule system so that we can get projects done like Prime Minister Harper did when he took from concept to completion 23,500 projects without a single environmental problem or public safety concern. That is what we can do again when we eliminate bureaucracy. We should use the special powers contained in Bill C-5 to rapidly permit a new pipeline to the Pacific and carry $30 billion of oil per year. For context, that one pipeline would increase our overseas exports more than the total exports that we have to the People's Republic of China today. It would be the single biggest increase in overseas exports of any project in Canadian history, but we need the government to get out of the way and let it happen. All of these things will be bundled together in the Conservatives' proposed Sovereignty Act that will allow us to take back control of our economic destiny and have unbreakable leverage abroad. When we unlocked our resources, though, we're not done. We need to maximize the political leverage that comes from those. Guaranteed access to critical minerals is about more than economics, it's about power and security. Canada has 10 of the 12 NATO-defined defense minerals right here under our feet. We possess one of the greatest energy endowments in the world. No modern economy or military can function without those materials and that energy. And that is why Conservatives are proposing today the creation of a new strategic energy and minerals reserve that would store up and stockpile these necessary materials so that we would have them in abundance in the event of a war, a crisis, or a supply disruption. Such reserves would strengthen Canada's resilience and our negotiating position, giving us more unbreakable leverage while they remain sovereign assets that belong to us. Le Canada doit mettre.
I'm going to be honest with you. I really like people that dream big. At the beginning of this speech, I got a little nostalgic when Pierre was talking about how we built a railroad from one end of the country to the other, how we carved out the St. Lawrence Seaway, how we built this country and how quickly we did it with the limited resources that we had so many years ago. The Canadian people knew it needed to be done and we did it. And that's something that we should all, as Canadians, be proud of. That's essentially what Pierre is proposing. Dream big. Not only are we going to mine, we're going to create a strategic reserve so that when the world needs something, when there is an emergency, Canada is the first place they look. And that's not the only reason. We need it to build up our own sovereignty, to build up our own defense infrastructure. And that's not the only two reasons. The third one and most important one is it gives us, as he said, unbreakable leverage when we're negotiating with the Americans. It's a bold vision, but it creates jobs here at home. It creates prosperity here at home, and it helps protect our sovereignty. And I think by and large, that's something that in a very divided time, all of us Canadians agree on. We need to protect our sovereignty. Here's more of Pierre.
We also have to build up our defense. We have to be capable of defending every square inch of our seas, skies, and soil. And I'm sad to say, we got a long way to go. Almost half of our military equipment is not in a usable state today. 1 in 3 fighter jet positions is vacant. We have only 300 full-time troops in Canada's Arctic, an area the size of the European Union. That means 1 soldier for every 15,000 kilometers. Our industrial capacity is so weak right now that it takes us a month to produce enough artillery for 1 day of war. We must build faster. Modern warfare evolves at an almost unimaginable speed. Ukraine has shown just how rapidly things change. Technologies are designed, adapted, and put into use in mere days. The Ukrainians modify their systems on the spot. In fact, some of their best platforms are actually made in the garages of Ukrainians on 3D printers, and they are turned around at incredibly low costs. And by the way, these systems deliver 80% of the casualties in the war with Russia today. Now, we're not going to build our drones in garages or basements like the Ukrainians, but we have to stop thinking less like bureaucrats and more like MacGyver. Defense procurement must be fast, agile, inventive, and now, not slow and bureaucratic. Rebuilding our forces will require serious investment, but let's be clear, spending is not the objective. It is a means to an end. We must convert every dollar into maximum operational strength by reducing administrative delays, by giving new powers to military leaders to purchase the goods they need with accountability, but without bureaucratic micromanaging from above. They must be able to buy technologies that don't yet even exist. History shows us how. You know, the United States, when it procured its first fighter plane in 1907, It did it with an RFP that was 3 pages long. And the Wright brothers delivered that flying machine, not because there was an elaborate process filled with committees and bureaucrats and paperwork, but because they had a clearly defined outcome and they were paid when they delivered the result. We must do the same. We must also reassert our control and our dominance over the Canadian Arctic. We will take back our north and ensure that no foreign power ever threatens our security. New bases are needed in Iqaluit, Churchill, and Inuvik. 4, not 2 icebreakers must be built and deployed. Accelerated procurement of submarines, tactical helicopters, satellite ground stations, and over-the-horizon radar. Rapid deployment of drone capabilities that cover our vast territory at low cost and limited risk to Canadian lives. Expanded recruitment that is based on performance and merit, not political correctness. And we must stand by our veterans and make sure that they are treated as the very best we have.
I'm feeling very patriotic listening to this. When I hear this, and when I hear the plan, and I hear the vision, and I hear the key word, which is now, it makes me proud. It makes me have a little bit of hope. That statistic that Pierre gave shocked me. The Canadian Arctic is the size of the European Union, and we have 300 full-time troops there. 1 troop for every 15,000 square kilometers. 1 troop. We already know from years of watching it happen that we have major delays in our defense procurement. The theme of Pierre's speech isn't just about restoring relations with the Americans, but retaining Canadian sovereignty. It's also about getting something done. And that's the thing that I think most people could agree, as long as you're being objective and not too partisan, that's something that's missing right now. We were promised a lot of things, and those things have not yet been delivered, and it doesn't seem like there's anything on the horizon. Lots of announcements, very few results. This is about now. This is what Pierre is promising immediately. Let's hear more of what he has to say.
Finally, if we want to be truly sovereign, we have to control our technologies. Dependence on externally controlled systems is a serious risk to our country. In the event of pandemics, wars, or other crises, we can't count on others to deliver the technology that makes modern life go on. Canada must never assume that foreign powers will maintain service or even permit continued operational access to critical technologies. And right now, we're getting the worst of all worlds when it comes to technological ownership. Too often, Canadians bear the costs, and foreigners get the benefit of developing technology. Subsidies make Canada an excellent place to lose money. Taxes make it a terrible place to make money. The result is predictable. Firms invent here, then they commercialize, and they move the ownership and the profits elsewhere. Canada absorbs the cost, others reap the benefit. We are inventive. We spend massively on R&D. Now we must reap the benefits in Canada. Canada needs a full overhaul of subsidies, tax policy, IP frameworks, investment review laws, with a goal of increasing commercialization by at least 50% over the next decade, and ensure that Canadian technology stays in Canadian hands on Canadian soil. That means requiring anyone who offshores IP that was developed with Canadian tax dollars pay those tax dollars back. It means allowing venture capitalists to roll over their capital gains into the development of new technologies and commercialization of those here in Canada. And it means banning foreign takeovers of sensitive intellectual property, data, weapon systems, cryptography, and other vital tools of modern crises.
Wow, that is a bold vision, but I think if you listen to what Pierre is saying there, it's common sense. That's protecting what's ours. It's making sure that taxpayers get good value for money and that intellectual property developed in Canada retains its Canadian unique identity. I don't know if anybody would disagree with that. I mean, this isn't a partisan thing. This is a common sense proposal for how Canada can evolve into the digital age. I think that that's something that we need to include in our discourse over the future of Canada. We need to have a spot in that conversation where we do talk about digital sovereignty. Very good words there from Pierre. He's getting closer to the end. Let's hear the rest of Pierre.
All of these steps bolstering technological, resource, and military sovereignty to this country is an effort to make Canada stronger at home so that we have unbreakable leverage abroad, including in our negotiations as we face the review of CUSMA. More leverage puts us in a stronger position to negotiate. Canada has leverage, and we can create more if we make the right moves. What is our leverage? We're already America's second biggest market. We control the biggest share of the hemisphere's airspace and northern approaches. We will have, under our plan, a strategic reserve of energy and critical minerals hosted in Canada under Canadian control, so we can sign an agreement with our American friends that would give them access to those minerals only at commercial prices and only if they keep our relationship tariff-free. We can spend hundreds of billions of dollars on defense and directly link the amount of that money that goes to American firms to continued tariff-free access to the American market for the Canadian economy, paid in installments that only continue as long as the tariffs remain off. We will secure every inch of our Arctic so that we strengthen our position within NORAD, more leverage, an alliance that both of us need for our operational overlapping and our shared threats. Finally, we should leverage our relationship with the American people. We should all be reaching out to American business, unions, media, governors, investors, mayors, civic leaders, and the administration itself as we work to fight for tariff-free trade and security cooperation. All these steps, all of them, will make us stronger at home so that we have unbreakable leverage in negotiating with CUSMA review. So we can get what we want. But what do we want? Tariff-free trade. In the course of negotiating the deal, we will aggressively defend our forestry workers, auto workers, steel and aluminum workers, and the farmers that feed our country and the world. Specifically, we will seek an end to steel, aluminum, and auto tariffs, as well as an end to the softwood lumber tariffs. And today, I am proposing that Conservatives will fight for a tariff-free auto pact with the United States, with shared protections against Chinese imports. In short, here's the deal. We should agree to keep Chinese vehicles out if Americans agree to let Canadian vehicles in. A full exemption to Buy America rules so that our companies can compete on construction projects, and a relaunch of the Keystone XL pipeline.
Pierre is going into French here, so I'm just going to interject a minute here, and he is almost done. I mean, this speech is about to wrap, but I think the Americans might go for that. I don't think Donald Trump wants a fight with the Canadians. He just wanted to reset the trade relationship, and that was part of him pulling America out of a one world order that's led by China. He's creating Fortress North America, and he knows he needs Canada for that. But there are still some trade irritants that are digital, that are dairy, and so on and so forth. We've got a problem here for our steel and aluminum makers. We've got a problem with softwood lumber. We've got a huge problem with our auto sector. What Pierre is proposing is they get access to our critical minerals and they have a consistent, reliable trade partner in exchange for a tariff-free relationship. And we would be the only country on earth that has a tariff-free relationship with America. I mean, nobody knows if Donald Trump would accept that. Pierre's not authorized to offer that, but that's what he's offering to us, the Canadian people. He wants to be able to negotiate that deal with Donald Trump as our prime minister. He might go for that. That might be what it takes to end this. Maybe.
And we should lock all these commitments into law so that it's more difficult for future administrations to change the rules in the middle of the game. The best leverage we have, though, is to be united here at home. All political parties love Canada. The Democrats, Conservatives, and Liberals love it a little differently than the Bloc Québécois, but even they want the best for their constituents. And the best way for us to become unbreakable in our negotiations and our discussions with other countries is to work to be united here at home. And that is why Conservatives are proposing a new all-party committee, a team, a task force that will work together as part of an effort to defend and fight for Canada in the CUSMA review. And we will put forward members to that team that will act in good faith for the benefit of Canada above the benefit of party. Let's be clear, though. Cooperation cannot mean silence. Opposition, the official opposition, has a constitutional and patriotic duty to scrutinize the government and to hold it to account. Abandoning this responsibility would not strengthen Canada, it would weaken it. We will work together where we can. We will oppose where we must, because loyal opposition is not just our job title, it is our national interest.
Pierre Poilievre not only calling for more Canadian unity, also calling for more political unity. He's proposing that each of the parties put forward a couple of members that form the negotiating team so that all interests in Canada are represented when we go to the table with President Trump and the Americans. Don't you feel like we really need to get back to that area? I mean, I said it earlier. I'm feeling patriotic listening to this speech, thinking about the possibilities for Canada, thinking about a sovereign Canada with a much better deal with the Americans. I'm thinking about it and I'm feeling all the feels. What Pierre is proposing here, I think, is reasonable. What Pierre is proposing here is cooperation, unity, a new deal that is coded into law, one that is unbreakable, and one that is going to set the pace for the future of our country and their country, united but separate.
Friends, history will not judge us by the disruptions we faced, but by how we responded, by whether we surrendered to events or mastered what lay within our power, by whether we blamed others or strengthened ourselves, by whether we fixated on what we could not control or built what we could, by whether we became stronger at home so we had unbreakable leverage abroad, because economic strength is national strength. Energy security is national security. Self-reliance is sovereignty made real, and sovereignty is not declared, it is built. Decisively, deliberately, and without excuses. Built by a country that refuses distractions, delay, and surrendering control over its own future. Built by people who understand that Canada's destiny will never be written in Washington, Beijing, or anywhere else, but by Canadians here at home. By a country that stands on its own feet, is master in its own home, that bows before no nation, and a country that is unbreakable. My friends, my ambition, and I believe the ambition of all Canadians, is for Canada to be that country. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Well, friends, how do you feel after hearing that speech? I wanted you to hear it because, as you likely know, if you're a regular listener of this pod, the mainstream media is not going to give that the attention it deserves. That was the conservative version of the Davos speech. A slightly different angle, but there is a lot of commonality between the Davos speech and between what Pierre Poilievre is calling for. Yes, Canada absolutely needs to build new trading relationships, and we should never again put ourselves in a situation where we are dependent or reliant on the Americans. But we do need to work out a deal with the Americans, and we need to strengthen things at home. We need to build, and we need to build quick. I wanted you to hear the whole speech in full. If you know somebody who might be interested in hearing that speech from Pierre Poilievre, by all means, share this episode. Every Canadian deserves to know what the options are and have all of the information when they make that decision, when inevitably we go to the polls. Friends, I bid you a fantastic weekend. Enjoy yourself. Let's be united. Let's love our country. And I'll be right back here with you on Monday with a new Scott Fox After 9. Oh,